You're all very welcome, our new online participants, to our WEAll Deep Dive, Cultural Creatives, where for 2 days here in Cloughjordan Eco Village, we're exploring the role of creativity and the arts in shifting the narrative and story around the economy, moving from an extractive, growth-based economy, making some sort of transition to an economy that's in service of us and nature, and not that we are in service of this current economy. And so we've been today diving deep into donut economics, exploring the role of place in a well-being economy, and sharing some ideas and practice. We're going to continue that. But for the next hour, we're joined by our online participants. Now, many more might join. We had 40 bookings for this session, so we'll see who joins. We're going to introduce our guest speaker in a second. Caroline will do that. But just again, what we're doing here is exploring shifting narrative and story. And the question we're asking in the breakouts after we hear from Kate is, what is the role of creativity in shifting the story? We'll go into breakout rooms online and in here, and then we'll come back together and we'll share the reflections and insights on that question. So that's what we're doing. I'm going to invite, sorry, I never said who I was. I'm Davy Phillip from Cultivate. With FASTA, we're hosting this deep dive with the Wellbeing Economy Alliance, which includes many other organizations and NGOs, North and South. And we've been setting up this Wellbeing Economy Alliance Hub to explore this question of making this transition to an economy that's in service of us and nature. So I'll hand over to Caroline to say a few words and introduce Kate.
Welcome, thanks very much for joining in, those of you who are online. And I'm Caroline White. I work for FASTA, the Foundation for the Economics of Sustainability. And in a room with about 25 people, we're doing a workshop here, and this is a blended session, as you know. So this is really great to have all this wonderful technology enabling us to do that. And we're delighted to welcome Kate Petriw from the WEAll Wellbeing Economy Alliance Global today. She's joining us in Toronto in Canada, and she is going to be speaking about the research that they've been doing about narratives and messaging to do with the economy and how we can change the way that we talk about the economy and make it more in fitting with a well-being economy. So I'm going to say a quick word about Kate. Kate's the Communications and Narratives co-lead in the Global Wellbeing Economy Alliance, so WEAll. And WEAll is a global network of individuals and organisations who are working to transform the economic system. Our Ireland Hub is one of about 12 active hubs all around the world. We also have WEAll members in a lot of other regions of the world, and this is a global team which Kate is part of, and they support us in our work. And for over 10 years, Kate has developed strategic and innovative campaigns for organisations in both the environmental space and wellness sector. Prior to joining WEAll, she led communications at Green Economy Canada, and she was driving awareness to programs that support small and medium enterprises on their journey to net zero. And in addition to that work on sustainable business, she also founded a mental health startup that she ran part-time with the aim of making the topic more approachable, and that led to a best-selling book that she co-authored. And Kate became passionate about transforming our economic system after realising the negative impact it had on our planet and communities, as well as our physical and mental health. She holds a BCom from McGill University, and she's lived and worked in Paris and New York and London, and now she's settled back in her hometown of Toronto. So Kate, wonderful to have you today. I'm going to hand it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Caroline. Thank you for the introduction. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining on this Saturday. And it seems like there's so many great things that have been happening on the ground there at the Eco Village. So I'm so happy to be joining you. Just to give you a bit of context about the research that I'm going to share. So at the Wellbeing Economy Alliance is actually celebrating its 5th year anniversary. And we wanted to see how the term wellbeing economy, as well as the Wellbeing Economy Alliance term, has been tractioning online, and also within our membership. So essentially what I did was we had a listening tool. It was called Amplify, and it looked at anytime someone mentions Wellbeing Economy online, we were looking at how they were talking about it, who they were, their background, and seeing was it negative and positive, and gathering that data over the past year. So this was in 2022 up until early 2023. And then the second part of what we did is we have around 2,000 members that are part of the Wellbeing Economy Alliance, and we interviewed them one-on-one to get their understanding of what is a well-being economy, what are the most important things to you, and hopefully those insights that we gain from that, we can help to educate others to understand, people who are coming from ground zero, how can we get them to a level where they're in an understanding of what a well-being economy is. So I will quickly now just open up the presentation. Okay. So there's a lot of slides here, but I'm going to be just taking you through the most important ones that I think are relevant. So looking at, let me get into slideshow for a second. Here we go. So when we looked at the listening tool, we found like in just 1 year, we had over 5,000 mentions of a wellbeing economy. There were around 4,000 authors. And I think one of the most interesting insights from this is over, I think 97% of the people talking about wellbeing economy is actually on Twitter. So that's more than in the news, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, all that kind of stuff. So we thought that that's definitely quite interesting. Sorry. I'm just going too quickly here. I think what also we found drove the conversations were different op-eds, or whether there were big events. Maybe some of you heard, but this past year we were a part of the Beyond Growth Conference. This is from last year's spikes, but that drove a huge spike in people talking about what a wellbeing economy is, degrowth, and all those other terms that are part of the Wellbeing Economy Alliance picnic blanket, if you will. We also looked into who are the authors that are talking about a well-being economy online. Some of them were not surprising. So we had a lot of writers and editors. Actually, 60% of our membership are top executives. We had a lot of business executives speaking about it. I think what's an untapped area in terms of audience for us, and it'd be interesting, maybe if you have connections in these spaces or are part of these spaces, but we're counselors and social workers. And that was really interesting to me, having a background starting in mental health, with a startup in mental health, and then also post-secondary teachers, and obviously scientists and researchers as well. So who were the authors in terms of like their demographics? So we had around 50-50, almost male, a little bit more male and then to female. What we found surprising here and interesting that Greenpeace has very similar stats. A lot of the people that are part of our newsletter, they're between the ages of 35 to 64, but the people that are actually retweeting the content are between the ages of 18 to 34. So we've kind of shifted some of our influencer programs to work with some Gen Zs who do have larger platforms. I'm just going to quickly go through those authors there. And this we talked about. Now, here's some of the top content that mentions, what is a well-being economy. What we saw over and over again is that a lot of people were trying to get their country to declare that they were a well-being economy. So maybe some of you have heard about this before, but we have launched the Wellbeing Economy Government Partnership Program. So this was in collaboration with the Prime Minister of New Zealand, Finland, Iceland, Wales, Scotland, and Canada. And so what you'll see is a lot of the authors that are on here are saying, this is possible. For instance, Dr. Sandra De Maio saying, we can move to a well-being economy. New Zealand and Wales have already done so. And I think this is a really important part about telling the story of moving to a new economic system, to say there are actually countries that have moved beyond GDP. Are they perfect well-being economies? No, they aren't yet. But I think they're definitely making great strides by having their own framework that does go beyond GDP. And then here we have Caroline Lucas. She's a former MP who was talking about it. We also find that content that has a lot of emojis and addressing some other members of parliament helps to get a lot of traction. I think this is a really interesting insight that we found. So Timothy Petriw, he is a millennial, I guess, economist who's quite popular in the degrowth space. But what we found is that when people are talking about the economy and helping to sort of shift the narrative, I'll explain it by just going through this tweet. So in the 1957 novel Ayn Rand, Atlas Shrugged, entrepreneurs desert to create a capitalist utopia. Now it's the opposite. As ecological crisis worsens, young students and workers are deserting capitalism to build an eco-socialist post-growth well-being economy. So sort of flipping traditional notions of neoliberal economics on its head. I'll show you actually in another one of our popular posts from our own page. We talk about how economics, household management from ancient Greek means to manage. So it's like changing what we think economics is. One thing we talk about a lot is some people are shy to challenge the system because we've made it seem so complicated and it's not something that they can participate in. But when you think of, economics in Greece means household management, I know how, it doesn't need to be that complicated. Some other things that we found that were really interesting is, and this is just from a creative standpoint, is diagrams and graphs. So anytime we put something together that was in a graph form, it tended to perform really, really well. So that's something that we're considering every time we're launching a paper, because a lot of people don't have time to read through the whole paper. And this is a great way to sort of summarize it. And also we have a lot of great engagement. This is a small, easy, low-hanging fruit thing a lot of people can do is make quote cards. So they're super simple. You can make these for blog posts. For the Beyond Growth Conference, we did this as well. We did this for Stockholm 50, and some of them went really viral. We had thousands of people like them. So I think this is something that audiences are really engaging with. Another sort of narrative or way that people are talking about going beyond our current economic system is talking about going beyond GDP. So this was definitely a popular narrative for sure. I'm now going to go into some of our top blog posts that we had. So we launched something around the Happy Planet Index. Now, the Wellbeing Economy doesn't endorse one specific index per se, but this is just something that we had done a project on, and it was quite interesting because even now I'm looking at the stats, and overall we have about 100,000 visitors to our website. And even this year we've had 20,000 visitors visit these blog posts. So I want to tell you what the angle of these blog posts were around the Happy Planet Index. This one was talking about how Costa Rica tops the list, beating well-being economies on sustainable well-being. And very similar, the Happy Planet Index launch recap event was about that. So we think that there's definitely a thirst for people to understand, where different countries are lying in terms of how they're doing in sustainability and life expectancy, and kind of flipping, again, these traditional notions on their head. So for example, Costa Rica has literally 0.05% of the GDP of the United States, but they actually have a longer life expectancy, and they're about nearing 100% renewable energy. And there's similar examples where you can talk about France. So France versus the United States, they have a lot larger GDP, but what if you actually remove the wealthiest people from both countries? France actually ends up on top because they are making more GDP per person. So it's just, and you'll see this in the news, a lot of people are just always reporting on the metric of GDP, but it's not, obviously, this group knows this, but it's not actually telling us the full truth. So I think that was quite interesting for us. I'm just going to kind of skip through here. So this is part of the one-on-one testing that I did with our members. So, and here's some of the insights that I found. So while many of them were able to really articulate what a well-being economy is, they really failed when it came to examples. And I think I see this a lot online as well. A lot of them didn't know about the Wellbeing Economy Government Partnership Program. And there's not just 5 countries that are part of this that are going beyond GDP and finding new wellbeing frameworks. There's about 15, and they're not part of WEAll, but they're doing it in their own way. So I think we want to continue to bring in examples that this is possible and that people are doing it right now. So that this year we're putting out more case studies and things like that. For example, I just launched a blog post on it turns out, most of the countries that rank in the top 10 of safe havens for the wellbeing economy community, or sorry, that's safe havens for the LGBTQ community, are actually part of WEAll. Like there's a very direct correlation between that. The other finding is that the top pressing issues are inequality and climate. This is kind of obvious, but a lot of people were talking about dignity and fairness, feeling really outraged about low wages and the injustice of people not being able to meet their needs while others are living in excess. So, and again, climate is definitely a top issue among our membership. There's some, I can definitely share this presentation afterwards, but there's some really nice quotes here from our members. Again, the problem with our economy is profit for all. What was interesting is that some did mention that capitalism is a problem. And so when I asked them, I said, it's interesting you use the word capitalism. We are experimenting with using capitalism, but what do you think about that? And there seemed to be this consensus that some people were shy to use it because it might trigger some people, or it's too divisive. So, I mean, being part of the environmental movement myself for the past, I guess, like 10 years, I've seen more and more people feeling more comfortable about talking about it. And WEAll is going to be doing that as well. Maybe in our chat, we can get into that more because I think that's an interesting one. So other findings is, be more open about talking about decolonization. This is something that we found our members in the United States talk more about, and in India. So I'm going to give you some graphs around those different trends and why we think that's possible to do so. So here's just some framing preferences. I think this might be interesting for your work, but a definition of a well-being economy. They liked either of these two. Well-being economy delivers social justice on a healthy planet, or a well-being economy is an economy in service to life. What's the framing preference for the problem? This one came out on top. We have an economy that exploits the natural world and most marginalized people to the point of collapse. So I think that one's interesting because it kind of goes back to the decolonization piece of really, being truthful about the roots of our economic system and how the Western world, has colonized and been able to, drive so much more growth than others because of, colonization and marginalization and all of that. One other thing that I wanted to show you here was that we did sort of a look at keywords comparing donut economics, degrowth, and those kind of trends. So what you'll see here is that degrowth kind of comes out on top, and then we have donut economics and then the well-being economy. So it's just interesting, all of these sort of may or may not have come out at the same time. And it's, again, WEAll is kind of a picnic blanket for all of these things, but it's just interesting to see what resonates. And then I wanted to take all of these terms and see how they fit in terms of ranking when it came to people searching the keyword circular economy. So while more and more people are talking about donut economics or degrowth, I think there's still like a long ways to go when we, if we want to aim to becoming the next circular economy. I think this is also interesting too, when we look at the keyword of decolonization versus Donut Economics, Wellbeing Economy Alliance, and degrowth. It's also extremely popular as well. And then one last thing I wanted to talk about. So I will share this with you. It's called Stories for Life. It's a great narrative resource. And we asked our team members, what did you think about this? They said that and some of our conservative members had similar feedback on some of our other work, and they said that we were potentially too negative and that we were not calling out the benefits that capitalism has brought us today. So I think that's really interesting. Some groups are targeting more conservative audience. Some groups might be targeting, people that are maybe way far left, and they don't need to kind of have that, maybe spoon feeding in some sort of way. But through some other narrative partnerships that we've had, they also found that they had similar feedback. So they had recommended to us, when talking about the economy, maybe you could say something like, update the economy as if it's a software, as if, we recognize the benefits that it has given us today, but we need to tweak it. Some people won't agree with that. I don't know, I think we do need a radical transformation, but I think it just depends on, what audience you're speaking to. And, that is something that one of our co-founders, Catherine Trebek, does talk a lot about. She says, we've hit our point of diminishing marginal returns, if you will, on our current economic system, and we need to shift it. So there's different ways of speaking to this, but I thought that was a really interesting insight to use. So yeah, that is basically the presentation. So I am going to stop there. I'm at exactly 15 minutes, so I'm feeling that I kept it short. There we go. And yeah, open to there might be some questions here. We can go into that in the breakout room.
Well, we might take a couple of minutes just to see if there's any clarifying questions.
Yes, of
and
course,
to
yeah.
shape the question that we have. So the question we're asking that will be in service of this deep dive is, what is the role of creativity in shifting the narrative? Now that's quite a closed question, so whatever you need to discuss in your groups, let's pull out that sort of idea, that approach, that creatively using different approaches we may shift narrative. But is there any, we might start with the online participants first. Could I see the online participants here without? I think Kate is. I've unspotted her, so in my computer I can see everyone. Anyone from the online participants? Always good practice to start with the online participants first, and then I'm going to ask if there's any clarifying questions here in the room. If the online participants want to put their hands up, I can see you. Okay, so no clarifying questions. Any clarifying questions here in the room from Kate? Peter.
Good. I may have asked you this question before, but is there a weakness in the use of the word, the singular reference to the well-being economy, when the critique from places like Latin America, Escobar on the pluriverse, is really an invocation of an opposition to a universalizing discourse around the economy, and claim really that the future is about heterodox and plural space for regionally and ecologically adapted economic and development systems in different parts of the world. So are we reproducing the kind of the Western notion of a singular homogeneous model? And are we maybe shutting down some of the more radical notions coming from Latin America?
No, that's a good question. So my co-lead actually is leading Latin America now. She's in Brazil, so she would be better to answer that question. I'm not as well versed in that space. But it's interesting because she is relaunching there. She, instead of calling it the Wellbeing Economy, she's calling it the other economy, Ultra economy, because I think in Latin America, well, and also in Spanish, economy bienestar actually means welfare economics. So I think that is more so just a language thing, and it doesn't make sense. But when it comes to, being open to other ways and forms of changing our economy, I think that's something that WEAll definitely embraces. I mean, even if you look at WeGo, for example, and again, of course, these are all a lot of Western countries, but they come together to collaborate to create their own framework. So they're not saying, here's the quality of life index and the standard of living index, and everyone has to use this one. I think they're each creating their own types of frameworks based on whether it's citizens assemblies or conversations with Indigenous people and all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, I think the well-being economy is one where it's participatory, and that's what we really emphasize in our policy guide is, before creating policies around this, make sure you're talking to the people of what's important, because everyone's going to have a different measure of success. And I think that's one of the reasons why GDP doesn't work, because it was created by, white Western men after World War II and was really a way to sort of, boost the economy. But it wasn't really taking in a lot of the other important factors around, inequality and health and all that kind of stuff. So.
Thank you, Kate. I would be quite keen to get into smaller groups where we can really start to explore this together. Caroline is going to hold the small groups here. Mel will assist us in getting into the groups. We want about 4 to 5 people in a group. A small group works best with that number. A few more and you've got too many. And just one process tip, if you're in a group of 5, you should be listening 4 times as much as you're speaking. This isn't an opportunity to download everything you know on this topic. This is a conversation. What we want to do is hear a reflection or an insight from each conversation when we come back to plenary. So hopefully that's okay. I'll be working with you and the online participants, putting you into groups, coming in to chat to you, and we might come back together online before we come back to the full plenary. I'll hand over to Caroline now in the room. So I'm going to put the online participants into room. Just introduce yourselves. The question for everyone, again, is what is the role of creativity in shifting the narrative? Now, take that question, critique that question, stretch that question, but let's come back with an insight, a reflection that is in service of this session and deep dive. Thank you, Kate, so much for the prompts. Have a good conversation. We will have 20 minutes and we'll come back to plenary. Okay, sorry for the noise for the online participants. The in-house participants are getting into order. So we have 15 minutes to really share some insights from our breakouts. We had 3 breakouts in the online session. So we'll start with some insights. We don't need to hear your whole conversation, but maybe if you'd like to share an insight from your conversation around this question, how do we creatively shift the narrative? So there was 3 online conversations. Which group would like to start? Deirdre, can I put you on the spot, if you don't mind? Thanks.
Yeah, sure. I think Susan was going to share our insight though, but I can chip in if that's helpful. Susan, if you're okay to.
Well, Susan, if you're there. Susan's all the way from America. Deirdre's in Dublin. Susan.
Hi there, everybody. I'm really glad to be here. We spoke about visioning as the creativity and visioning as knowing where we want to go in terms of the well-being economy. And we talked about how figuring out solutions to resilience and being creative there. And we talked about the challenges of, I think, Deirdre, you said Tina and tapas, that sometimes people think there is no alternative solution. So we need creativity and in coming up with new ways of doing things. I think that's a brilliant summary.
That is perfect and very well modeled for the sort of length if we're going to get through everyone. Thank you, Susan and Deirdre, and I think you were joined by Colin. The other group, Hilary, your group, is there someone that could give an insight from what your conversation was? So you had Paul Leach, who's down in West Cork just now, and a few others.
I guess I could give a quick recap in terms of it was a wonderful discussion. And we talked about the use of you could actually use anything to be creative, including the law. And because Paul talked about creative confrontation and the use of law. You can also use very social, natural things like grandparenting. And grandparenting is a really powerful vehicle for creative shift, two-way mentorship. the grandchildren and the grandparent. We also talked about new metaphors and the use of, for an example, that the membrane around the cell is the one that makes the decisions, not the nucleus in the center. And that when we start to work with these different kind of metaphors and creatively for people to understand, and one of the most important things is the use of the arts and drama and poetry and dance and music. That's what we talked about.
Fantastic, Hilary. Thanks for that. And our third group, we had our own Sean Conlon there on his holidays from France, Morag just down the street in her office, and Kate was also in that, Adrian up in Donegal, and Alex. Who would like to feedback, or is there one insight you might share from that group?
I made some bullet points as we were going along. We talked about how information doesn't land. We need to tell better stories that capture people's or appeal to people's heart and imagination, doing it in a participatory and inclusive way. So inviting people to co-create those narratives, using local knowledge, linking money and lived experiences to the story you want to tell to change the narrative, and just being aware of doing it in a broader space so that we're escaping the echo chamber was the last point we were talking about.
Fantastic, well delivered. So that was our three groups here. We had about 5 groups in the room, and so I'm going to invite them now to share one insight. If the room could see if the online room could see the in room, would this conversation like to share something?
Yeah, we started from thinking from nature and how we could extend our own being as being nature, and how that might change the way that we go into this question. And we also, the last point I think we ended on was looking at how we can subvert, if we're changing narratives, we're kind of subverting things, and how the wildness of nature is seen as often a threat, and the wildness of ourselves is often, and where those spaces where people feel uncomfortable, and stretching those or paying attention to those. I think is that kind of.
Does anyone in the circle want to add anything? Thank you, Grania. So we're over here. Who would like to feedback or give us a reflection? Sinead?
So we talked about how creatives create experiences. They offer invitation. They can offer various different messages, and they offer opportunities for taking risks. One thing we talked about was that everybody is creative, that we've created everything that, the living world, or not the living world, the man-made world around us. We've created this and we've created our systems. And so therefore we have the capacity to create more and create different ways. But one thing we noted that creatives, those working in the arts, tend to play more, are more used to playing with or engaging with the unknown. We're getting a bit of music from downstairs. So they're more used to kind of expanding their comfort zone, like leaping into the unknown. So that's something that they can share as well, that process, that creative process of leaping into the unknown and seeing what emerges.
I'm sure the online participants can't hear this. We're testing, sound checking. We're having Speak Eatsy tonight, a convivial gathering with music and dancing. So hopefully you can't hear that. I'm going to invite this group over here. I'm going to pass the microphone to someone. Would someone like to reflect? It's not your whole conversation, it's an insight that would be helpful.
Hi everyone. Hi to the online participants. I'm Roisin and this is the group that spoke. So we'd an interesting discussion starting with the expression of how Irish people talk to each other and greet each other like, hi, what's the story? What's the crack? What's the story? And that was interesting. And then the conversation moved to through like propaganda and narrative and populism and the force of what exists as a narrative currently, and how the creativity and the arts can open up that space and reframe it. we talked about context, self-expression, and then there was also a conversation about theatre, and a really lovely question that you could put in, instead of just talking about theatre, you could put in any art form in, if theatre has a responsibility to the future, it's to ask good questions. And then there was a conversation also around like the dialogue, the action, the co-creation, and what's shifted narratives before. So yeah, there was also a piece about how to use visuals more, and the context of that not everybody sees. And we need to make sure that the people who aren't in these spaces talking are also represented, and we talk to them also.
Great. That was a great recap, Roisin. Hopefully the people in the room in the online space are getting to hear these insights. We have two, I think, at least groups to go. And maybe, Kate, I might ask you for some final words of reflection before we close the session, if that's okay with you, Kate? Perfect. Okay, so in this group, who would like to reflect? An insight. Don't tell me everything. Just say what you think.
What did I say at the end? I don't know. I don't know what I said at the end. We were talking about how creativity or the arts, particularly, I guess, the performative arts, gives experiences, and that that offer us fleshy-bodied humans emotional experiences, and that maybe this is the most powerful potential for change, is those embodied experiences. Sinead.
Thank you, Matthew. So I think there's only one group still to feedback. I'm coming over. So who would like to feedback? Declan?
Do you have?
Oh, sorry.
Okay. So we talked about the importance of grasping something quickly, but there was a slight contradiction in that. So modern society, images are important, and for some of us, visual images appeal to us more, and therefore, you know, there's a slight conflict between where we are in society at the moment, grasping something quickly, and the internet abbreviation too long didn't read, TLDR, things like that. You know, we maybe need to pay more attention to things and think more deeply. So the donut is a good image, and it does appeal to people.
Thanks, Declan. Sorry, Kevin. Does anyone of that group want to add anything? Do you want to add anything? Is there anyone sitting with anything that hasn't been said that'd love to say in this topic? Is there anyone online that's sitting with something that they just want to say that will be in service? Okay, so there we are. Alex, do you want to unmute yourself and share your reflection?
Sure. Hi, I'm Alex from, I'm a WEAll Scotland volunteer, and just something just to share just really quickly is when I talk with people who are outside of this space, who just have normal jobs, they do a normal life, they don't ask me what a wellbeing economy is, they ask me what wellbeing is. So I think that's a really important question, because it means different things to different people. And yeah, just wanted to pop that out there in case that helps.
Thanks, Alex. And I think we have to be careful. Often, sometimes people think we're talking about wellness, not well-being or a well-being economy, even although there's obviously connections in there. Okay, we're only a few minutes away from closing this session. It's been very rich if it has been short, and maybe just inviting you, Kate, to just say a few words, reflection to close.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much for having me. I just sort of want to echo what Alex had said. I feel like from these conversations that I've heard, you know, sometimes we think of narrative, and I've been in the online media space for a long time, so I think of it as a tweet, but I love these ideas of it being creative as a grandparent, or just in a totally, completely different way. So I really enjoy that. And one other piece is, you know, the book that I wrote was actually, it was on mindfulness, and the HarperCollins had told me, we want you to write a book about mindfulness, but don't use the word mindfulness. It's actually a best-selling book. We don't use the word mindfulness until the very last chapter, and then we surprise the audience. We say, oh, you just learned it. So I wonder if there's a way that we can kind of do do that through talking about a well-being economy, or whether it's degrowth or donut economics and things like that. And then one last thing, I think if everyone could, lean into what you're really good at. And I just got this book called The Artist Way. Maybe you've heard of it, but being an artist and being creative is just doing it over and over and over again. And it might not be great, but sometimes, it's like spaghetti, something's going to stick. So if we could all go back and start throwing as much spaghetti as we can, I think we'll keep making progress. So thanks again for having me.
Thank you, Kate. And I noticed Sean is there, and I don't want to miss the opportunity. Sean is one of our core group, our steering group. So before we close, maybe Sean, an invitation you to say a few words. Yes.
Okay, great. Well, I've just been swimming in French culture for the last couple of weeks and really enjoying it and really enjoying the differences. And I suppose like we touched on it in our little group about rooting these conversations or stories. I really liked the emphasis that Alex was putting on stories. And I had mentioned the whole notion of myths in Ireland as being very, very powerful. But I think each country, each culture, each place has its own way of addressing, what we're talking about. And for me, it's to a certain extent getting away from the words, getting away from the vocabulary, getting away almost from the science, is to touching people's hearts and touching their emotions, touching them in very different ways. And I think that's the core of what artists do. But somehow we in Ireland need to start with Irish art, whatever that is. And I'm very open-minded about what that is on the island. And there's a great opportunity for us to do that. I mentioned there are 4 great football matches on this weekend in Ireland. And it's crazy what's going on, but it touches everybody. It touches a huge part of the population. And I think we need to learn from that, what's important to people. And somehow it came out in the group that the economy is important and to talk to them through money. But I think we also can talk to each other in very, very different, rich ways. And in Ireland, we have the whole language thing as well. So I'd like to see that coming in. But it's really great. Congratulations, Davy, for managing the session. It was very, very interesting. I'm sitting in a hotel room. I cycled here today, but it was great to be able to participate and to hear everybody so clearly and to have the breakout groups. Thank you.
Thanks, Sean. Thanks, Kate. Thanks, all the online participants. Thanks to everyone in the room. That was a great session, if not short. Thank you.